Unfortunately, the trend continues in not just San Francisco. In many cities, police are quitting. We got this story from the SF Chronicle. SF police appear to be doing their own defunding as cops leave in record numbers. We got another story in Seattle where some dude yells to a cop. The cop yells back, "I'm done, I'm out, I'm quitting." So you won't really need to instruct the city to defund the police or to vote on it if the police just don't want to work anyway. And in fact, that's one of the goals of the far left. While you have many of these far left politicians in Portland, Seattle, and apparently SF and other cities, they're voting to defund the police, disband or abolish the police. But where they can't, the far left is going around attacking residential neighborhoods, harassing people, and the DA won't prosecute them. Thus, many cops just quit. Maybe it's on purpose. Maybe it's all just dominoes falling over, but it's getting worse and it's getting bad. You see, while we're hearing about police quitting, we're also hearing this. Over 60 Portland 911 calls go unheeded overnight as police respond to riot. This is what you can expect with no police. Here's the story from the SF Chronicle. They say, as politicians debate the future of San Francisco policing, there is another discussion going on in the station houses. The record number of officers resigning. In the first 6 months of the year, 23 sworn officers resigned. Police department records show. Of those, 19 took jobs at other law enforcement agencies, both in California and elsewhere. By comparison, 26 officers resigned in all of 2019, and only 12 officers resigned in 2018. If the police exits continue at their current pace, the SFPD is on track to lose nearly twice as many cops this year as it did last year, and close to 4 times as many as in 2018. Quote, "This is just the beginning. Dozens are actively in the hiring process with other agencies," says Tony Montoya, president of the Police Officers Association. The members are upset that the social experiment being conducted in San Francisco is failing, and they would rather work someplace that values them, said Montoya, a constant critic of City Hall's calls for police reform, which after the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis has taken the form of shifting money from police budgets to social causes. Quote, "Members have gone to places like the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office, Pleasant Hill, Beverly Hills, Petaluma, Palm Springs, Placerville, Long Beach, Idaho, Texas, Arizona," Montoya said. Police Chief Bill Scott said there's been an uptick in officers leaving this year, but that many of the applications to leave predated the national unrest after Floyd's death. It's a tough job, and for many officers, it's also a long commute to and from work, Scott said in recent interviews. If there are opportunities closer to home, people are going to take them. Now, that may be true. People just simply want to work closer to where they live. It's a known problem in San Francisco that many of these officers can't actually afford to live in the city. So they have to drive very far, get to the city, and then drive around the city and then drive very far home. Nobody really wants to do that. Maybe that's the case. I don't think it's fair to say, though. This problem's been going on for years. San Francisco real estate troubles, it's been a recurring problem. It's really expensive to live there. Now, of course, he's saying some of these predate this. I'm not entirely sure I'm convinced that's the crux of the problem or the bulk of it. Take a look at this. In Seattle, "I'm leaving. You guys won." Moment Seattle police officer tells activist he's quitting the department because of constant unrest caused by Black Lives Matter protesters in the city. Now, while this is Seattle, I think it shows us that a lot of these officers don't want to constantly have to fight with protesters who won't get charged, who will get released. And every day it's the same exact thing. They're demoralized. They're insulted. People don't like them anymore. They don't want to do the job. And that to me is, well, I'll say this, man. It's unfortunate. It's scary. And this is what you get. Over at Fox News, they say 60 Portland 911 calls go unheeded. You ever hear that phone call that happened during the peak of the riots? A woman was in her car. She called 911 and the police said, "Ma'am, what would you have us do?" Right? She was surrounded by people screaming, banging on her car. They said, "We can't help you. You're in a mob." There was also a story from New York City. Hence why many people are probably leaving, where a guy said people were fighting in his building and he called the police and they said, "What do you want us to do about it? The city's under attack." It's going to be up to you. Fox News says more than 60 emergency calls to the police went unheeded overnight in Portland as officers were preoccupied with hundreds of demonstrators downtown and were pelted by rocks. On the 80th consecutive night of protests, the Portland Police Bureau declared a riot. This we know. They say the targeted building was owned by the city. This we understand. 2 officers went to the hospital. Quote, at the time of this release, over 60 calls from police service were holding around the city, the Bureau said in a statement. Some had been holding for the length of the events described here. Call types ranged from theft, vandalism, suspicious activity, hazards, hit and run, burglary, violation of restraining order, alarms, stolen cars, harassment, and many others. That violation of restraining order to me, that's kind of the scariest, because you got a restraining order for a reason. The cops can't respond. Yeah, well, there's a riot going on. It's been going on for some time. I can only imagine that the average person is going to flee the city because these politicians just keep pushing the same goal, I guess, some kind of overly dramatic last-minute reform to release people who are violent, unhinged criminals. And guess what that means? It means more riots, and it means more unanswered phone calls. That's what you're going to get. Here's the story from the Daily Mail about the Seattle police officer. They say, a Seattle police officer appeared to announce his resignation from the department because of ongoing Black Lives Matter protests in a viral video telling an activist, "I'm leaving, you guys won." While the circumstances surrounding the video remain unclear, the officer, who is not named in the clip, is seen pulling up in a patrol vehicle next to a protester, winding down his window and appearing to sarcastically ask, "How's your day going today, bud?" When the activist responds, "Not really, because you're around." I guess, I don't know what he was trying to say by that. The officer tells him he has some good news for him. "I'm sorry for that, but just don't worry, man, because guess what? I'm leaving. You guys won. Effing 2 months, baby, and I'm out." The person filming the exchange asks him to clarify that he's going to resign, to which the officer responds, "I'm effing gone, bro." The 2 men continue to exchange false pleasantries. When asked how he feels about stepping down, the officer says, "I'm feeling great. I'm stepping down from this department. You guys won." The officer is asked if he is stepping down because of police brutality, to which the officer says he isn't. Rather, he's handing in his badge because he's tired of dealing with Black Lives Matter protesters. Their dialogue is momentarily interrupted when the officer becomes embroiled in a heated exchange of words with another protester who is out of frame. Specifically, what sparked the verbal altercation is unclear, but the officer blares his horn and speeds forward his vehicle before coming to an abrupt stop and leaning out his door, pointing a finger at the activist who remains off camera. While the officer's attention is diverted elsewhere, the man filming the video calls out to others, "This guy is resigning because of Black Lives Matter." The officer then returns to his vehicle and speaks to the man filming once more, who proceeds to taunt the officer. "You triggered, boy? You triggered?" The man asks the cop. "Oink, oink, F you and your blue life." Amid the man's taunts, the officer adds one of his own, telling the man he can't wait to finally be friends with him once he quits the Seattle PD. "We'll never be friends," the protester angrily insists. "We will never see eye to eye. I don't care if you take that badge off. You'll never be one of my people." So what's the point? This guy, maybe he's going to quit, maybe he's not. But this is the war of attrition. The far left has already said it's part of their goal. They want to keep protesting because it costs them nothing. Wear down the city, get these cops to quit, and that's how they end policing. And then what happens when there's no cops? You will come crying, you will call, you will beg, and there will be no one to save you. Maybe it's a good thing for some people. Some people are armed and they can protect themselves. Most people aren't. Most people, maybe many people, won't. And what happens when you see someone, a group of people march down the street, kick in a door, they go in, start beating the crap out of people who live there, stealing their stuff, screaming they're gentrifiers and it's their home now? Who will stop it? Nobody. Maybe community watch groups. Let me tell you something interesting that may be a good thing. You want community policing, real community policing? You might get it. In Colorado, when Antifa showed up to a neighborhood, a bunch of locals got together, chased them out, beat the crap out of them when they attacked someone first. I think about these education pods. Have you heard about this? The schools are closed, so people are forming pods where they hire a tutor and then put all their kids in essentially a community classroom, kind of like how it used to be. It's really interesting what's happening. It's getting everybody kind of back to basics. As people flee cities, they're now going to form education pods. Why not community policing pods? You get a bunch of the locals together. You say, we're forming a neighborhood watch. If someone attacks any one of our houses, we're there for each other. Here's the perimeter for which we can extend. Better yet, some of these people might form their own volunteer police forces to go out and deal with the mobs. The mobs will regret this, I assure you. You know why? You see, police have to be held to a certain standard. If a cop does something, he could lose his job, he could lose his pension, and people don't realize this. When it comes to an individual, if they're engaged in self-defense, that's the end of it. There's no one to sue. Think about it. A cop goes out, gets into an altercation. Something happens. Fires some rounds because he was threatened. Dude dies. They sue. City pays out wrongful death. Let's say you're a regular average Joe and you're not worth anything. And you're engaging in a neighborhood watch against, Antifa who's showing up. They attack you. So the guy fires in self-defense. Cops actually end up coming in eventually for an investigation and say, self-defense. A violent mob was attacking him. End of story. Who are they going to sue? The guy? He might not have anything. The department has taxpayer funds. So this may end up working out very well for advocates of the Second Amendment who don't want to deal with the BS. And I'll tell you this. A lot of these leftists have said, you don't need cops, just call the police. Okay. When everybody is armed and engaging in their own policing, crime might actually end up going down. So all in all, by all means, keep it up and you will see regular people rise up and crush these riots very, very quickly. I got a couple more segments coming up in a few minutes. Stick around and I will see you all shortly.